In every business that carries a product to sell, there's a massive amount of money that could be tied up in inventory. It's in the best interest of a company to carry the least amount of inventory. If you carry inventory, there's a potential damage could happen in your warehouse rather than selling it on the shelf of a retailer or being in the homes of the final user of your product. You really have a lot of money tied up. So the inventory process is a huge, huge component of every single company because you can tie up all your capital on inventory that has the potential for being spoiled or damaged and not in the customer's hands, and also the revenue from that customer being in your pocket as a company. So you have to pay attention and look at what it is, and it really takes a lot of different forms. The raw materials that are out there. One of the most interesting things in historical aspect is the building of the Ford plant in Michigan, where they have the entire thing. A ship drops off the iron ore for a car at the beginning of it in the Rouge plant, and then at the other end, vehicles come out the other end as the ore is smelted right there, turned into rolled steel, and then turned into vehicles as it comes off the line. That's almost the epitome of what it is to make exact use of your inventory. There is no transportation cost except for the ship dropping off the ore and then at the other end hauling the vehicles out. Raw material is a expensive inventory, and then the components that are involved in the process. Then you have, in this case, trucks and via cars in work in process, and then you eventually have a finished product inventory. And sometimes, talking about cars and trucks, it's sitting on the lots of dealers waiting to be sold. All that is money tied up in capital by the organization, capital that they can't spend on expanding operations and having marketing or anything else because it's tied up in inventory in the process. Or if you're getting loans on that, because you can get floating loans in the process for what you have in car dealer lots, if you have loans on it, you're paying interest to somebody else. It's money that you don't have. That's why this topic of supply chain management from beginning to end really is wrapped up in the inventory and the processing of the inventory. It's a dominant cost. Inventory exceeds in the United States today $1 trillion. And on top of that, when you don't have it, you can't sell it. If you don't have it on somebody's shelf inside of a retail store, that store is going to scramble to try to find something to put on the shelf. And that something may not be your inventory, but somebody else's inventory because they had more inventory in their stock than you had. Balancing this whole aspect out of what's inventory and what's not is a big deal. And effective supply chain management is synonymous with reducing inventory. Here's a series of reasons to hold inventory. Unexpected changes in customer demand. Somebody puts a post out on Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden you have a surge in demand and everybody's going nuts. They want your product. If your product ain't there, it's not going to sell. Don't tell the English people I use the word ain't. I can get in trouble. Okay, but that being said, pay attention to that aspect of it. Uncertainty in the quantity and quality of the supply is a big deal. What if you had some carrier that consistently dropped off packages because you're not using Amazon, you're using a really a different transportation to somebody's door, and they keep on dropping packages off to somebody else's door? Okay, you have a problem there. That's a simple problem compared to the fact of what if it never got shipped at all? What if the vendor went belly up with your product sitting in their warehouse? What about lead times? What if you planned on having a lead time and all of a sudden you had a crisis like in the Red Sea and you have terrorists out there doing all kinds of things? You have to spend 10 more days getting to your customers. That can really hurt you because the customer wants it now. We've conditioned everything for now. And then economies of scale in transportation and manufacturing. If you're making polo shirts here in the United States and you want to have an all-American made product, so you sit down and you go down to the LA Fashion District, you find a vendor that can sew them for you and everything else. You can get small quantity purchasing. It's really good, but no matter what happens because of small quantity purchasing, you're going to have a higher price and you're paying American wages. What if you had a shipper that and the manufacturer over in Vietnam, but you have to sit down and work with them to actually have 10,000 shirts to put inside of a shipping container? It takes longer, but the cost of the wages is extraordinarily much smaller than it is over here. But then you have to worry about Who knows what may happen? Are they going to really send you the proper things inside that shipping container? You have to hire an inspector. Then you have to sit down there and watch, make sure is the container properly sealed. Do you have to worry about the ship coming across the ocean and water sloshing up and getting inside the containers, and all of a sudden your 10,000 shirts, 5,000 shirts are damaged because ocean got into a leaky container? Economies of scale is great in that aspect of it because you saved a lot of money, but you have a longer lead time and you have other potential things that could damage your product in transit. So you have to watch all that. Really, the need for inventory, the nature of the customer demand, the lead times in the system, the number of different products being considered, the length of the planning horizon, service level requirements. Good night. It'd be so much easier just to toss it all in an airplane, fly from Vietnam over here. Oh, but wait a minute. Air freight costs a small fortune, and you're going to lose all your profitability and all the savings that you had. You have to really pay attention to what the world is like because you have to balance all these different factors to be successful in the world of supply chain management. Supply chain management isn't just tossing things on a ship. Supply chain management begins with the design levels. It begins with how it's made because every single step is part of the supply chain. So order costs, the cost of the product, transportation costs. You have to pay attention to the different holding costs. We call them carrying costs in the industry, state taxes, property taxes, insurance, and inventory. You bring something in from another country, is it subject to tariffs? One time I had some doors shipped over, and the tariff on the doors, the way that the manufacturer designated them, I had to pay a 20% tariff on them coming into the country. A good thing I had a sharp gal that worked on my end of it because she says they misclassified it. The actual classification is this over here. And instead of paying 20%, it had to pay 10%. It covered all of her fees plus a couple other ones on top of that. It was great. Just because of the holding costs and the carrying costs, she sat down there, was sharp enough to identify how it should have been done in the process. What about the maintenance costs? What about if you get something that's already obsolete? What if your company is manufacturing swimsuits and you have the previous year's model out there and it's not the current one that is hitting the market that people really want? That's now an obsolete product. How do you go about dealing with the obsolete product? Well, you tend to liquidate it as fast as possible. You don't want to hold it any longer. So all of a sudden, you have a product that you paid $80 to manufacture. In the process, you're hoping to sell for $160. Now, all of a sudden, now you're stuck with an $80 product that you paid for that you might have to sell for $75 and lose money in the process. There's also opportunity cost. Also, you have a product sitting over there. It hits TikTok. It hits Instagram. It takes off and you run out of stock because you never anticipated that and you didn't have enough safety stock on hand. So all of a sudden you lose because you can't sell. You lost the opportunity to sell more product because you couldn't gear up your supply line fast enough to meet the demand, and something else reached in and filled that demand instead of your product. Now, I want to warn you, chapter 2, they have a lot of formulas they put in the book, and it's a bit terrifying. Do not be terrified about it. Here's the reality of supply chain management. There's a thing called the computer. The computer, you just sit down and figure out what D is, what Q is, what K is, and you sit down there. Here's an H over here. You identify the computer and you push a button, and the program goes click, 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 and identifies all the different numbers. Yes, you should know about the individual components. Yes, you should have a general idea of the formula, but I'm not going to be testing you on the formula. I want to make certain you have a good grasp of the concept of what's involved with the supply chain overall. I'm not going to be testing you on teeny tiny formulas on any test in our class. Not to worry, don't panic. I opened the book and I thought, okay, this is going to be really tough to teach, except for the fact that when you start getting into the details, almost everything can be done very quickly on an Excel spreadsheet or some of the different types of programming we'll talk about later on. So here's a couple of things. I think you should take notes on this, but demand, since we're talking about formulas, whenever you see the formulas, don't panic on the formulas. Just have an idea of what the definition is. D, capital D, normally referred to demand. Q is for quantities that are fixed on Q items per order. So boom, normally a company every single week, they want a product this amount every single week for order. And then, so each time the warehouse places an order, it is for Q items for that company. And that can vary because the company may change that. A fixed cost is your setup cost. You need to sit down there, your tooling to sit down there and have new product. So when you're working the formula, keep a reference sheet handy. I find it really handy for me as well in the process. So pay attention. Inventory carrying cost, we call that a holding cost. If you're going to hold the unit per day, that unit is held. I really didn't plan on this one time. I ordered something from a different country. It came into the port, and all of a sudden, I had to figure out how to get that item from this area to this area over here. And they says, if you don't get this out of here in 3 days, we're going to charge you a holding cost of. And he named an outrageous price. It gave me serious incentive to sit there and get it out of there because I didn't want to pay the extra cost. So I had to sit down there. I paid a premium rate because of my lack of planning in the process. But fortunately, that one gal I told you about previously, it saved me money. She saved me money again. Sometimes if you have the pros that you hire into supply chain, it can really save you a huge amount of money. The lead time, always, you always want to sit down there and hopefully have almost no lead time and the initial inventory zero. You want to have that, but the planning horizon has to be long. In a perfect world, you just drop ship up, you call somebody up in a different country, have it manufactured over there, drop ship it over here, United States, boom, and it happens, and you don't have anything at all in the supply chain. Everybody else worries about that process. That'd be great. That's not reality. If you're going to make it here, which I think is a great idea, manufacturing coming home to the United States where it belongs, that aspect of it really enhances the overall economy here, especially when you can sit down there, manufacture it, go through your supply chain in the United States. It's faster. You're using American labor to end up dealing with an American consumer. That's always the best thing. A little bit idealistic, but the reality of it is that really reduces a lot of the costs we're talking about here. The economic lot size, it's a simple model that illustrates the trade-offs between ordering and storage costs. If you don't hold it, hopefully your customer will by the time they need it. That being said, the customer doesn't want to invest their capital. They'd rather you invest your capital to hold it so when they need it. Now, it'd be nice if they have their own version of safety stock. In other words, stock you're holding just in case in the back. So that's good, but they want you to hold on to the safety stock because you need to get it to them as fast as possible. And fast as possible tends to be in the next 15 minutes if you can possibly pull that off. That never happens that way. But that being said, if they could have their wish, that's exactly what they would wish because they don't want to tie their capital up holding your goods. It's a simplified version of a real inventory system. We talk about the economic lot size. The model has a lot of key takeoffs in the industry. Here's a list again. Holding costs is small h, Q, quantity orders for fixed items, D is a constant rate of items per day, and K is your fixed cost or your setup cost. And here's one of our first formulas that we come across. It really is the economic lot size model. There's two important things. The two is always there. You have your Q, your K, and your D. And so you take the square root of those, divide it all by H on top of your holding cost. And that really is the Q that you have to worry about. So look at the variations and the variable labels. That's always a big deal. Focus of our class is on concepts. The formulas are instantly available in any computer. So that's not something I'm going to be testing you on because we're going to be looking at a lot of different formulas. I want you to have the flexibility, but I do want you to know some of the different letters, and that way you're not going to be confused. Have an idea of the formulas because these formulas are used across the entire industry on a regular basis. So that being said, look forward to as we continue the examination of what inventory is all about in this chapter. Take care.